All right, so to start to draw a building, we want to start by drawing the floor plan or a shape on the ground. And so let's grab our pencil tool here, and we can pick any shape we want. I did this previously, so I'm going to try to pick a shape that's maybe less complex, but we'll see how we do. So I'm just kind of winging the shape here a little bit. And you can see how when I'm drawing here, it actually kind of looks like I'm drawing, like it looks skewed. It doesn't look like a rectangle. It looks like it's like a trapezoid. And so the reason why is, you can see, if you look at my screen right now, you can see how this line is on an angle. If you're to go up here under camera and you change camera to be from perspective to parallel projection, it will actually make this look a little bit more square. So something that's a nice technique for modeling, parallel projection makes a little bit more sense for modeling than it does for looking at an object. And then I'm actually going to do a little bump out here, something like that. And so now I have my object here. And so this would be theoretically the floor plan of our box, of our building. And so first thing that I want to talk about is creating thickness. I think it's important to create thickness in your walls. It's important to create thickness in the floors. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to extrude this box up. And last class I figured out that this dimension, the distance down here, is in inches. So if I want to do 1 foot, I'm just going to type in 12. And that's going to give us 1 foot in thickness for our floor theoretically here. And so again, this whole exercise, I want to teach you how to draw a building so that you personally know, some techniques to draw a building. But this is also kind of setting us up to draw our playground. So now you're going to know how to draw some of these objects. So if you're wondering why we're doing all this, that's why. So we've created this floor. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to grab all this. So I'm selected the pointer button, and I'm going to select my whole screen here. And I want to right-click on this object, and I want to make it a group. And so the purpose of making groups is to organize yourself. It's also to lock or to kind of restrict access, to restrict the ability to edit things. And last week we talked about a little bit about the difference between groups and components. And so I think a good example of a group would be a floor. A good example of a component would be a door or window. So a floor is a great component, or a great group, because it's not necessarily going to repeat. It's just a one-off instance. Whereas a component is great because we're going to repeat that, and we want that component to be the same object. We don't want it to be different. So that's how I would use a group. And so now that we have this, we want to create walls. And so to do walls, what we're going to do is actually trace all of these lines again. And I'm just quickly tracing it. And what I want to do now is I want to offset some lines inside here. And so when we offset in, I'm just going to hit escape on the keyboard for a second. When we offset in, we want to offset a thickness for a wall. And so most of you are probably just starting to learn about wall thicknesses, some materials in your other classes, and if you haven't already, you will be. And so typically here in Canada, we build, especially in residential, a lot with 2x6 wood framing, and that's kind of our primary framing material. And so when you think about a wall, we'll have drywall, we'll have our stud, we'll have sheathing, plywood of some sort. You maybe have an airspace or exterior insulation, and then you have your siding or brick or stucco. And so when we think about that whole wall construction, you're probably somewhere between 7 inches and maybe 12 or 13 inches in terms of wall thickness. And so for the thickness of our walls, I'm just going to pick an arbitrary number kind of in the middle. We'll pick 9 inches. I think 9 inches is a good number because it's probably in between siding and brick. So if you want to do brick, you don't have to add a whole bunch more. But if you want to do siding, you potentially can reduce that thickness a little bit. So I didn't mean to make that more complicated, but I think it's good to start thinking about thicknesses. I made our floor 12 inches as well because Again, you could typically go to a 2x8, a 2x6. You can go smaller in terms of that thickness, but it's harder to go larger. And so I think picking a good round number gets you into a good place. So let's offset this. So we're using this offset button up here, and we're going to offset in, and we're going to offset in our 9 inches. And you can see in the bottom right hand corner I'm typing 9 inches, and that offsets that like that. And so the next thing we want to do is extrude these lines up. So we have our walls, we're going to extrude them up, and we're going to type in 9 feet here. 9 feet is a good wall height. You know, a lot of older homes will have 8s, and a lot of newer homes will have 10s or 12s or whatever. 9 is, I think, a very good wall height. And so we have our walls here, and we want to do the same thing that we did with the floor. We want to create these walls into a group. And again, this is just good from an organizational perspective to keep yourself organized. So let's select the pointer button, and we're going to select all of this. And you can notice it actually did select our floor at the same time. And so we can hold the shift button, and we can shift to deselect our floor. And we can right click on this, and we can make our group like so. Extrude. So it's just this button here. Yeah, like in that, like, yeah, in that middle part. So we've got that extruded up. And so with our walls, our next thing is our roof. Can anyone tell me some different styles of roofs? Arbor? Yeah. It's not a common one. I would have. Mansard, that's a good one. Gable is a good one. Any others? Hip roof? Shed roof? There we go. So I'm not going to draw all roof types today. I am going to draw a gable, a hip, and a shed. And I kind of am going to draw a flat roof as well. A flat roof I think is pretty simple. But I want to give you some tools to essentially be able to draw some different styles of roofs and work with them. So let's start with a gable. And what I'm actually going to start with is our overhang. And so I'm actually going to start by retracing all of our walls again. And a common practice here in Canada, I would say, is a lot of buildings probably have somewhere around a 2-foot overhang. And so once we create that box, we can offset this. So we can offset this 2 feet. And we can actually offset outwards. We don't have to offset inwards. So we can offset out 2. And actually, I think I just did 2 inches. Let's do that again. So let's offset 2 feet. And we can also just type 24 inches. And you can see now we have our box offsetting outside of our walls. And so the next step with this is typically on most buildings we'll have a fascia. And so again, starting to just think about thicknesses and making the building a little bit more real in terms of its appearance, because those thicknesses do make it more real. And so let's use the extrude button again, similar to what we did with the walls. And we're going to extrude this up. And actually, before we extrude it up, let's actually get rid of our interior lines. But before I do that, if I were to go here and erase, it's going to actually start erasing my groups that we have. So let's hit Control Z, and let's actually select both our floor and our wall group. And we can actually right-click on these, and we can go to Lock. And so by locking these groups, it just prevents us from accessing them and changing them. And so now when we go to erase, we can go to erase these interior lines, and you can see them highlight blue when we click them. And I did erase one too many lines. Let's do that again. It's probably better to do this in like a series of a few lines so you don't erase too much. So we erased all of our interior lines now. And so now we want to extrude. So let's extrude this up. And why is it not letting me? I'm just going to add one more Is this surface not? I do not know why. It's not letting me do this now. I find sometimes if it's giving you an error like this, tracing the object again is another good way to do this. Let's see if it'll let me do it now. Sweet. What is going on here? Just going to retry drawing these lines. Let's hide. Let's hide our group here. So it is. Can't push and pull a smooth surface. What is going on? All right, don't know why that's happening. Let's go about this the hard way. So I'm just going to type in 6 inches here, and I'm going to. That kind of looks like maybe it's an issue. I don't know if this line is straight. I didn't have this happening in the last class, so don't know why it's happening now. But we'll adapt and see if we can overcome that. So let's just add some 6-inch lines here. And we'll get our fascia eventually. I think there must be something off axis, which is why it's doing that. I don't know why it's giving us that issue since everything before seemed to work, but I digress. And not that it's not fun to watch me do all this. It's just another technique on kind of how to overcome stuff, I guess. And so once we finish closing all of these parts in, we should now have kind of our roof structure, our fascia, and I'm just going to hide this line below here. And so we've got our roof structure there. And to draw a gable, that obviously took a little bit longer than it was meant to. We're going to start with this kind of front part here. And with this front part, there's a few different ways to draw a gable. The first thing I often start with is finding the center point, the midpoint of a line. And in this case, the edge of our kind of one face of our roof. And I'm just going to draw this blue line up. It doesn't really matter how high right now, but I'm just going to draw it up. The next thing I'm going to do is we want to talk about slope. And so typically for a slope of a roof, we'll talk about it in a few different ways. One, we'll talk about a percent. So there's a percent degree of slope. Second would be an angle. So it's like a 30-degree angle slope. Most commonly, though, is probably a ratio. And so we use a ratio to 12. So the ratio to 12 is 12 inches. So we want to have a 6-12, meaning 6 inches of rise for every 12 inch of run, is what that means. And so if we want to do a 6-12 or an 8-12, let's do an 8-12. We'll make it a little bit different than I did last time. So I'm just going to actually type in 12. And I'm actually going to type in 12 feet because, again, the ratio doesn't really change. It's still the same ratio. I'm just using a bigger number. So I'm going to type in 12 feet. And it also will look a little bit better because it'll be a little bit easier to see. And I got to find where my point is. And if you want to figure out where it is, you can also just go back. And I actually am very close to our line here, oddly enough. And now we want to go 8. So we want to go 8 feet up. And so now that we have this slope, we can actually just connect in like this. And then we can do the same thing this way. But since we found our top point, we can also just go straight up to there. And so now we have essentially our gable here. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to remove these two lines here. And I'm going to remove this line above. And so we have our gable, our peak of our roof there. And the next step is typically what we'll have on most roofs is a fascia. You can see that we have our fascia on the bottom, but we'll have our fascia on the top as well. And so we can use our offset button again, and we can offset in 6 inches. And then what I'm going to do here is a lot of roofs will be actually just straight down like this. Not always, but it's something that you'll commonly see in Canada. I would say a lot of that's due from a cost perspective. So when you have this kind of box end, it just makes it cheaper for construction. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to erase a couple lines. This really is actually off axis somehow. Very interesting. So now that we do this, let's actually go up to our view. Let's just unhide our walls and so we can see them. And so what I want to do is I want to actually extrude this gable in so it's flush with our wall. And so you can see now we have a bit of an overhang there. And with this fascia, we could actually extrude that in as well, but I'll just do it this way. So we can bring this line along here, and we can bring this line, actually don't know where it should be. Let's extrude. Let's extrude this back. There's some weird things going on with this roof. I do not know why. I'll go back to doing it the manual way. So let's do this line over here. And that time it actually did snap. And we can bring this one in. And so we have ourselves a bit of a gable here, right? So the next thing with this is I'm going to actually do a hip roof as well. So that's essentially a way to do a gable. It's maybe not the only way, but it's a way. And I did this in the previous class and did not have issues with that roof area. So I don't know why it's doing that to me, but it's okay. We can work with that. And so a gable roof in some respects is very similar, but we want to make that peak go in. And to just kind of show some of the basics here, we can find this midpoint, and let's just draw this line up very high like that. And we'll do the same thing. We'll just do 12 feet. And we'll find that 12-foot mark, and we'll go up our 8 feet. Nope, not 8 inches. Let's do 8 feet. 8 feet. And let's bring that down to here. And then now we can extend this line. You can see the pink line will actually resemble the line being on the same axis as something else. So it's going on the same line as our existing kind of slope line that we have there. And now we can bring this line kind of down like this. So that would be a gable. And so to make a hip roof, what we want to do is actually bring this line back in. And we want to find the red part here. So let's just bring that line all the way in like that. So that would be the peak of our roof. And so probably the easiest way to do the gable is understanding this middle distance. And so this middle distance from the middle here, and I know everyone loves math, it actually worked out really nice in my other class. I think this number was like 12 feet. So I just obviously picked some random numbers here. So we have 23 feet 2 and 3/16. What a lovely number. So 23 feet 2, 3/16. And so what we want to do now is we actually want to take from this midpoint, and we actually want to draw this in 23 feet 2 and what did I say, 3/16? Something like that. And then we'll draw this line up. And so now what we do is we actually connect from our points down here up like that. And that doesn't look like a whole lot, but once we go in and erase these pieces here, you can see now that we have kind of the slope on the end here. And we can also take this line, and I don't know where this will extend up like that. So we're going to have to do some weird things with this roof. But we start to have a gable. And so looking at this other end, let's do our 23 feet. Is it 23, 2 and 3/16? I don't know. It might be lopsided if I didn't get that measurement right, but it's fine. It's the same concept. And so once we have that measurement, it's obviously a lot quicker to create our gable. And we can draw this line through here. And so now we have, sorry, our hip. We have this hip roof here. And so the last part of this exercise is we actually want to connect that gable to the hip. And again, this is really complicated, and I'm not trying to make it overly complicated, but I want to show you some techniques on how to draw a building, because I know that's why a lot of you are here is you want to do architecture and draw buildings. And so I find these techniques will be useful for class, but will also be useful for that. So as I just did there, I'm going to grab a line from the point of this gable, and I'm going to bring it in, and it'll give me a blue dot when it intersects with the face of this other roof. And then once you have that, you can actually bring these lines back in. And so sometimes connecting roofs is really simple. I am going to give, I haven't uploaded the, actually no, I did upload the recordings from last week, but I haven't given them to you or told you where to find them. And so I will do that. But what I'll do is all the recordings from the previous class and this class will be together, so you can see both recordings. And so I did a little bit of a different roof in the other class, and so that may or may not be helpful for you. So we have a roof here. Whether you like it or not, I guess, is completely up to you, but it gives you some techniques on how to draw a gable, how to draw a hip roof. And the flat roof was, really that part before we extruded it up, which we kind of glossed over a little bit because it didn't work very well. But now that we've kind of created this roof, we can select it all, kind of using the same technique as before, and we can make this a group. And this is actually a really good way to create iteration. And so we can actually use the move button. And if you see here at the bottom, when I go to move a roof or an object, it says if we actually click the control button, it will copy that object. And so that's a great way to copy something. I'm actually going to do this one from scratch, so I'm not going to copy it. I'm just going to move it. But you could theoretically copy that as well. And I was going to copy it, but because I had issues before, I'm just going to spare you that. So in terms of this building, there's a lot of different ways we could do a gable. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start off with this main line through here. And for a gable roof, and what I'm doing is I'm drawing from like the longest part here, if that makes sense. And for a gable roof, typically for a shed roof, typically I'll keep a much more lower slope roof, more so a personal preference. So maybe we'll do something like a 312, or let's do a 212. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to type in 12 feet, and we're going to find that point there, and we're going to go up 2 feet. And this creates our triangle, and then we can use that pink line to continue that slope. And we can find that, and so that's our slope there. And so this part's really easy. Let's extrude this way, and I actually should have removed that line before I did that. So let's pull this over to this side, and then we can pull it over this side as well. And so with this style of roof, I think we have a couple things going on. We don't really need it to be, in this area. So I'm just kind of looking down here. And so if we want our roof to be, it's probably going to be a little harder to find that part. I'm just going to go from down here. We want our roof to follow this building. We can kind of subtract this part from it. And so now our roof kind of follows the building like that. And we'll make this look a little better in a few minutes here. But let's do the same thing here. I don't know why we have 2 points here. Sorry, there we go. And let's raise this up so it clicks. Like so. I'll just do the bottom edges here. And we can get rid of these parts as well. And so, again, there's different ways to draw a shed roof, but this can certainly be one. So let's extrude this up a little bit. And you can see this is actually extruding up a little bit differently. But that's actually a good thing, because what I actually want to do is I want to make some overhangs here. So let's make this 4 feet. I made that 4 inches. Let's make this, I'll just type in 48. Type this in, 48. And we can just bring that a line. And then we can bring this one back. So bring this one back, 48. And then to bring it out on the sides, what I'm going to do is just connect these lines. And connect this line. Connect this line. And you know, if you're a little confused by all this, that's completely fine, because you do have the recording. So I'm going to go 2 feet out on the sides, so 24 inches, 24. So there we go. We kind of have our shed roof on top of our building. And again, whether you like that style of roof is, you know, up to you, but I just want to kind of show you some techniques. So why is this relevant? Well, we're going to be looking at making a kids playground, a kids hangout area. And so in this assignment, it talks about doing a space that's 3 by 3. We actually did discuss this last class, and I actually already put up an addendum to that. So we're going to make it 5 meters by 5 meters, so a little bit bigger in size. 3 by 3 is, I think, just a little bit cramped. So we're going to make it 5 meters by 5 meters. And so let's start by doing that. So I'm just going to go over to the side here. And again, we could actually, maybe just to finish this part off, let's just actually group this roof here. And we can group that. And again, just a good way to stay organized. So let's start with this area, and let's create a box that's 5 meters by 5 meters. And the cool thing about SketchUp is I'm actually working in feet and inches, but we can actually type in metric as well. So we can type in 5 meters, and SketchUp will automatically know that 5 meters is equal to a certain amount of feet and actually do that math for you. So we have this box here. Let's extrude it that same 1 foot or 12 inches. And if you prefer to work in metric, that's fine as well. I'm just Imperial is kind of my preferred. So, but I mean, we do both all the time. So it's, you know, it is what it is. So let's just group our floor. Group.
Is there a way, like, when you are selecting the box and you're like pulling it to make it extrudiant, to like release the mouse and type, or do you have to hold the mouse and type?
Hold the mouse and type. Yeah. No. I don't think there's another way. Let's just trace this for a second. And I'm going to offset this one outwards. So let's offset this out 9 inches. Yeah, it doesn't look like it says. There's a way to do it. Yeah. so the question was, is there a way to release the mouse? But I don't think there is a way. Again, I'm not super. I've used SketchUp a lot in my life, but I don't use it daily anymore. So, so now let's extrude these walls up 9 feet, and we can also extrude them down another foot to cover our floor. And let's actually go in and we'll click our pencil or our pointer button, and we're going to select this, and then I'm going to deselect our floor and make a group out of that. And let's just double check. Yeah, it looks like our floor and our walls are separate. And so we have this kind of 5 meter by 5 meter box, and we have the walls. The one other thing that I would maybe share is you may want to actually remove a wall. And the purpose of removing a wall would be just so that you can hide it, so it's easier to work within that box. So what I'm going to actually do in the walls here is I'm actually just going to extrude and remove this one wall. And I'm going to erase this line on the bottom. And I'm going to close this component. And I'm actually just going to redraw this wall now. And the purpose of this is if I make a wall like this, I can actually separately hide it. And there are ways of doing that without. You can use a section tool. Section tool is probably the best way. And so if we extrude this up, we can then make a separate component just for this one wall, or a separate group, sorry, for this one wall. And then we can go in here and click hide so that we can see in without having that visible. So that's kind of the start to this exercise. And I'm going to pause the recording. We'll talk a little bit about just what to do, but I think this gets you kind of started with the actual space for your building.